I'm Caitlin, and this is Book Chats. For this week's Top 5 Wednesday, it's Top 5 Futuristic Books. First, I want to talk a little bit about how I define futuristic. Immediately, I kind of thought of like sci-fi books or books that are set in the future, but I also realized that within that, I didn't want to read just books that are set in some future, but I really personally wanted to choose books that had a pretty strong technology aspect, or they had some element that was really like, this is the thing we don't have now that like could maybe be a part of a future, or someone can imagine as part of the future, or I don't know, technology to me was part of what I wanted to talk about. One of the things I really considered, I read several books that would be considered steampunk, and I had to really think whether or not I would consider those, and I decided not to because I think that steampunk is kind of a separate genre, and I really like steampunk, but it's very specifically saying if we lived in, H.G. Wells' time and we were imagining the future, what would the future, our imaginings be? And I wanted to do something that's like more like right now what our imaginings for the future are. And so I did not put any steampunk on my list. My book number 5 for Top 5 Futuristic Books is Across a Star-Swept Sea by Diana PETERFREUND, or PETERFREUND. I think those are both acceptable pronunciations from her website. So this is actually the second book in kind of like a duet. But this book, Across the Star-Swept Sea, which is a futuristic retelling of The Scarlet Pimpernel, had better technology. And so when I was thinking about like tech and what I wanted to do, just the ways that the storyline goes in the books, this one to me screams future more than the other does. And that's why it's number 5. Number 4 is actually, I think, the only book on this list that is not actually set in the future. I think it's set in like the 1980s, but not in our current timeline. It's set in like an alternate Britain that like if all of these other things had happened, then it would be alternate. And it's The EYRE by JASPER. It's this whole Thursday Next series, although I haven't finished it. So there's a couple books in the Thursday Next series I haven't read yet, but The EYRE is the first of them. And what I love about these books is that there's a ton of literary references throughout. Like The EYRE clearly references Jane Eyre and like rewards you for being well-read and being literary minded, but it also has kind of these like random crazy things happening. There's just crazy like technology in it that allow him to both play with literary references and play with random technology. So I really enjoy it. The third book on my list is actually the only nonfiction book. I know you're like, what? Nonfiction, futuristic? But I love this book because it's kind of a look at what we need to do to get to a future place. So the book is called Packing for Mars by ROACH, and the premise of the book is if we actually want to go to Mars with our space program, what do we know now that would help us, and what do we need to know in order to go? And so it doesn't look, and it's not focusing on rocket science. It's actually focusing on all the other science that supports a space mission. It's fascinating. She has wonderful footnotes that are hilarious. You have to read the footnotes, and it just is really entertaining, really great, and has little threads of all of her other books kind of tied in with it. So book number 2 is actually a book that I read 2 years ago for the 2013 Debut Author Challenge, and I think it was published first in 2012 in England and then 2013 in the United States, and it surprised me by how great it is. It's called Earth Girl by Janet Edwards, and if you'll see in the cover right here that I'm putting up now, that is the American cover, and they were trying to show, so the premise of the book is that it's a future where we've terraformed a bunch of planets and most of the population of Earth has moved off of Earth, but there's a small subset of people who are born with a genetic defect or a genetic problem that means that they can't survive in other worlds' environments, so they can only live on Earth. And the main character is one of those, and they are considered like disabled because they can't leave Earth, and they're considered to be lesser by a lot of society. And she has dealt like her whole life with kind of that stigma, and she really likes what they consider like archaeology, but it's really like kind of like Indiana Jones style treasure hunting for time capsules that people left behind in all the cities of Earth. She applies to be in an off-world university's first year archaeology program because the entire first year they spend on Earth learning how to, dig through everything. And so she applies and she gets into the program, and then she pretends in the program that she doesn't have this problem. So she pretends that she's normal and all of the things that go along with that. And she's like this really tough character. She has all of this like training, but she also doesn't really know. And it's really interesting all the elements this brings to it about like what we tell ourselves about whether or not people are different or the same as us. It's like how she interacts trying to fake having been off-world, never having been off-world, how she interacts and how she lies to others and also to herself. And it just brought up all these questions I was not expecting from that cover. So I'm actually going to show you the British cover too, over here, maybe, which is a little better. Yeah, so I can see where they were going for like, oh, she's like chained to the earth, but it just makes her look like a hippie, and she's not. And nothing against hippies, but it's not about that. The books that are my #1 futuristic books are Ender's Game and Ender's Shadow by Orson Scott Card. When I was going through my list with my sister, she was like, if you didn't have these books on your list, I would seriously question your ability to do this. And I was like, no, they're #1. If you are interested in futuristic books, if you like books that kind of twist your brain and have like things that just are unexpected and surprises, you should definitely consider these books. They're great. I read the first one after it was referenced in a physics class. In our textbook, we had a problem that involved the battle rooms in Ender's Game, so I picked it up and read it. Loved it, loved the way it twists, and for a long time I was like, not gonna read Ender's Shadow, not gonna read Ender's Shadow. Basically, Ender's Game is from the viewpoint of Ender, who's like the main character in the events that happen, and Ender's Shadow is from the point of view of his friend Bean. And when I read Ender's Game, I was like, Bean was not that interesting to me. Everyone says that it changes the way you see Ender's Game. I love the experience I had reading Ender's Game, and finally I caved in college, picked up Ender's Shadow, and it was amazing. It was all the things people said it would. It completely changes your view, even though it's the exact same event and you know what's gonna happen, and it like brought me again to that place of surprise that I had when I read Ender's Game, even though I knew that it wasn't a surprise. It's an amazing piece of writing. It's very good. I highly recommend you pick it up. Pick it up from a library or a secondhand bookstore if you don't like Orson Scott Card, but definitely pick it up and read it if you're interested in sci-fi or futuristic books. And those are my top 5 futuristic books. How about you? What are your top 5 futuristic books? How would you define futuristic? Do you define it differently than I do? I guess I didn't mention all the tech things that were cool, but you can ask me in the comments if you want to know, because I had that element to what I was doing. So I will talk to you later. Bye. And the top 5 Wednesday of this week is authors you would like to